In this week's edition of the KC Laboratory, we are covering the final four unique opponents that the Chiefs will play this season. Will Matty pick somebody other than Travis Kelce for his game MVPs for any of these? Tune in and find out.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, or on our YouTube channel, all over social media, or our morning newsletter, KCSN Daily, dedicated to your Kansas City Chiefs. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
KC Laboratory, sponsored by Emprise Bank.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the KC Laboratory, sponsored by Emprise Bank. An Emprise Bank debit card is good anywhere in the country. You have access to 55,000 fee-free ATMs worldwide through the Allpoint ATM network. You get the same kind of access to your money at any bank across the country while getting the value of working with a trusted partner in Emprise. Emprise has been our trusted partner at KCSN. Emprise has been, you might say, our partner in possible. Emprise Bank member FDIC. We're so appreciative of them. And as always, I am so appreciative of my good pal, Matty Lane, joining me this week. Matty, we are without Kent, so theoretically, we could just spend this entire time nerding out about defensive football and
wait a second.
Only defensive football.
You're tempting me with a good time.
Going to do it. We're not going to do it.
I don't know. You're tempting me with a real good time here. This is painful. So yeah, we kind of put our backs up against the wall here. In order, we've been doing on the lab here a season preview for all the Chiefs games, and we have ran ourselves almost into the Chiefs' first preseason game, which is 2 Saturdays from when you're listening to this. So we are running out of time to work our way through all the Chiefs' opponents for this upcoming season. So we're going with a rapid fire episode today. We're previewing the final 4 teams. 4 of them on the Chiefs. That's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals, the Denver Broncos, the Houston Texans, and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, you may be saying, wait a second, it doesn't seem like you guys have done every game. That is true. We're not going to do the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Chargers game preview a second time, especially during the offseason. So we're leaving those out. So these are the final 4 unique teams that the Chiefs will play, and I think we're just going to try to churn and burn through them. However, there is one very important question that we have to get through. Who wins in a battle royale between 3 Bengals, 9 Broncos? What's a Texan? Or is the Texan going to be a Bull, or is it going to be somebody from the state of Texas? Ambiguous.
Somebody from the state of Texas.
Ambiguous. 7 Texans and 50 Seahawks. 500 Seahawks. You can pick however many you want.
Oh, man. See, I was going to say the Bengal, but like if we're talking about 500 Seahawks, no, it's still the Bengal. The Bengals winning.
See, and this is why I want to be ambiguous, because like if we're talking like 7 like Bulls, I don't know. 7 Bulls, I think, could take out 3 Tigers.
Bulls could get there.
But are we just talking about Texan? And if it's a Texan, that means does he have a gun? Like, what is it? It's a Texan. It's like, I don't know. They probably do, right? It's like, how does that now factor? Like, you use your imagination, guys. You can send all of these to Craig on Twitter. That's at BarleyHop. Tell him your answer to who wins this battle royale. But we should get on with this now.
Yeah, we absolutely should. I love that got added midway through our season previews, that was a thing every single week. As long as we all agree, it's not the Seahawks. It doesn't matter. It could be millions of Seahawks. It's not the Seahawks. So
I still have a bone to pick. Tucker's done polls for all these, and the Bills one, I forget what they were up against, but the Bills, like a Buffalo, barely won. And like it's blowing my mind that people don't understand like how dominant Buffaloes are. Like there's a Buffalo mom protecting her baby Buffalo from like a pride.
It would have been against a Raider. Like,
oh my God. Yeah. And it was close. It was like 60-40, and it was even close to 50-50. Like, guys, the Bill was going to win. The Bill's a lot higher up on the power ranks than people gave it credit for. So that upset me to my core. But we got to move on from this. This is a more like a June podcast that has been roped into the season preview segments here.
All right, let's get on with it. We are talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. This is week 13, Chiefs at Bengals. Maddie, I mean, we're just going to dive right into it. Cincinnati Bengals quality of roster. How do you feel about this?
It's good. It's a very good roster. I don't know if I think it's as good of a roster as some of the teams the Chiefs face earlier in the year. I know they went to the Super Bowl, so it sounds kind of silly to say, but I think they have a very good even roster, but not a great roster. And I think that played out last year. That's how come every single playoff game they played last year, every single game they played against good teams became one-score games that were decided in the final half of the fourth quarter. And they just played elite situational football, which is good. That doesn't take away from them as a team, but roster talent-wise, they have some significant holes along the offensive line. I think their front seven has a good collection of players, but I don't know if they always play as this top end unit. Like, I don't think it's a dominant unit anywhere there. And the secondary has, again, Jesse Bates, great player. Mike Hilton was really good for him last year, but I don't know if together they just make this dominant unit like we've seen out of some of the teams earlier. So good to very good roster. I just think their success came more on the back of elite situational football, a good combination of coaching with the talent that they had, and it kind of created a special season. The Bengals having a big slide this year based on that talent, based on some of the 50-50 natures of their games or plays or drives that they had, I could definitely see them taking some serious regression, and then all of a sudden even calling them a very good roster in terms of talent makes sense. We forget, this team, I understand they lost a quarterback, but 2 years ago, this team was really bad. Like really bad. So to call them, a top end talented team after just one extra draft, that seems a bit rich to me. So, like I said, I put them in the top 10 in terms of talent, but definitely not the top 5.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Absolutely, fully. I do like some of the moves that they made. I mean, Alex Kappa is a great ad. Lyle Collins is a great ad. I like their draft even. Like a lot of the moves that they made were good, quality, solid moves. I just look at that and I look at it and I say, yeah, this is a clearly like a tier 2 roster in the NFL. It's good enough to win a bunch of games. It's good enough to win their division. But I think what we saw last year was them. I hate to even say the word overachieving because these guys, I mean, they put their players, like we talked about it a lot last year. I mean, we talked about it a lot last year. They put these guys in the best spots to win. Like, yeah, Jamar Chase. Yeah, you're throwing him, kind of 50-50 balls. You're asking him to go up and get it. But, with Jamar Chase, it's like a 70-30 ball. So, like, we look at it and we say, oh, well, that's, we'll see how sustainable that is. It can be sustainable. So I do see that a lot of members of this roster, it's not necessarily an overachieving thing. Now, there are definitely spots where they certainly overachieved. I'm not going to say that. Certainly. We'll get to some of those here in a little bit. But I do feel like the quality of the roster is good, but I don't know that it's good enough if they get into, situations where their talent has to make up for, some of the stuff against some of the AFC's top teams. Like, I'm clearly taking the Bills over this team. I'm clearly taking the Chargers over this team. Hell, I might take the Chiefs over this team in terms of talent on this squad here. So, I mean, there's some AFC teams in there that you're looking at and you're going, you know what? They're a rung down from those guys. So, from that perspective, I mean, they didn't change much on the coaching staff. The coaching staff did a good job of, maximizing that talent. They should have stuck with them, and they did. So we're going to move right past that on to new addition here. And I'm going to pick a guy. I know I mentioned 2 guys that they added on the offensive line. I'm going to pick a guy that I think is going to win a starting job in Cordell Volson. Listen, Jackson Carman was drafted to this team. He played a little bit of tackle. They didn't really like what he brought there. So they moved him into left guard, and then they didn't trust him at all last season. And when he played, frankly, he was bad. Currently, he's kind of projected to be that left guard. Cordell Volson was a guy we really liked. Like, we loved the way that he played. We loved the technical ability we had. We even said that for that kind of guy, like, he's going to get on the field fast in an offense that's going to give him an opportunity to. And I think that this is a path for him. They can get good, quality, average, even above average play out of Cordell Volson, but even expecting average play out of Cordell Volson in year one, all of a sudden you got to really look at that offensive line and go, okay, they did a good job of remaking it. And there's a lot of good things about it. That was the thing that kind of was the impediment to the Bengals being really good. They were really good. They were in the Super Bowl. They were very close to winning the Super Bowl, but like consistently good was the amount of pressure that they allowed to Joe Burrow throughout the season. If you go in and you protect him just that much better, they could be a lot more dangerous than maybe even I think they can be.
Do you think he's stealing a job from Jackson Carman or Alex Kappa? Who it can't be Alex Kappa because they just paid him a decent amount. You would assume
no,
he's pretty
it's gotta
slated
be,
in.
It's got to be Carman. It has to
Okay.
be Carman. Carman looked bad last year. He did.
He did.
He looked bad last year.
He did.
So, yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to stick on the offensive line because that was a big issue for them. So I will go with La'el Collins. One of the better right tackles in the NFL, quite frankly, when he's healthy. He's a little bit of an interesting fit. I don't know if his play style exactly matches what the Bengals usually like to do. He's a little bit nastier, a little bit more nitty gritty, not as much. I guess the rest of the way their offensive line plays me is a little bit more finesse. And maybe that's part of why Jackson Carman looks so out of left field sometimes with them. That's not his game either. I don't know if the style is perfect, but at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter if there's a slight difference there. He's a very good right tackle. He's arguably just as good as Jonah Williams on the opposite side. So you get this massive improvement at the right tackle spot from what they were able to bring out there last year. And then so you kind of have these two bookends to protect Joe Burrow a little bit more. Like they tried to improve some guys on the interior, like I already mentioned Kappa, whether it's Jackson Carman full-time at guard, Cordell Volson stepping in. They also brought in Ted Karras. Like they revamped the 4 out of 5 positions potentially of this offensive line. We've seen another team do that recently, and it worked out pretty darn well for them. So that's the area to watch. I got to shout it out to Hayden Hurst stepping in for CJ Uzomah. Big deal. Like he's not going to put up crazy stats one way or the other, but very good blocker, very helpful for their max protect stuff to have a tight end that can step in and actively get in front of a defensive end long enough to get this play off. I think Hayden Hurst can do all that same stuff. They're not going to ask him to be a stud. He's their 4th or 5th option on any given play. But as long as he can do that on third downs and then provide some pass pros, like I just mentioned, like 18 new additions. So like those guys will also count as my players to watch. And then we'll just move on to Craig's player that he's excited to watch because I kind of got entire offensive line plus tight end plus like 13 other guys.
And all of the weapons that they like, this offense has a chance to be ridiculously good. It really does. The quality of those weapons is super good. My player to watch is going to be Eli Apple. Eli Apple's projected to start on the outside.
Watch,
right
not read his tweets.
Well, my player, I don't really care about his tweets. He can tweet whatever the hell he wants. But I look at this defense. I see a lot of guys, a lot of good young players, a lot of guys that are going to bring energy, that are going to play together, all this stuff. They added Daxton Hill to this group. They added, Cam Taylor Britt to this group, 2 guys that we were, high on, that we liked. Eli Apple's probably going to be the starter opposite of Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton, Jesse Bates in the backfield. Like Eli Apple could be a weak link in that secondary if he takes a step back, and they can't afford for there to be a weak link in the secondary. I do think that a lot of what they're going to do is going to rely on that offense to score a lot of points and then pin their ears back and rush the passer. We have seen that defense in Kansas City a lot, and we know you got a weak spot at corner that can be targeted over and over and over again. It makes it very difficult to hang on. It makes it very difficult to play in that strategy, and it makes it very difficult to, play the kind of offense, play the kind of game that you want to play. The way that they started slow in a lot of games this past season, they can't afford to do that. And if Eli Apple is playing poorly, I think it just can shake what otherwise looks like a pretty well-rounded secondary that could be pretty good. So let's talk about how this team can beat the Chiefs. Maddie, how do you think, what do the Bengals have to do to beat the Chiefs? They did it twice last year, and now they're playing a game at home. What do they have to do?
We've seen it, right? I mean, they throw YOLO balls up the sideline at pick any corner you want for the Chiefs right now, probably. Jamar Chase, maybe T. Higgins, some guys go make some plays. Joe Burrow escapes a little bit of pressure that comes his way. They move the ball down the field. Maybe it's sporadic. Maybe it's not consistent every single drive, but when they're picking them up in chunks and in spurts the way they were against the Chiefs in the past, there's no reason as of right this second to think they can't do it again. And then defensively, it's kind of the same thing. They seem to get a really good read on what the Chiefs were doing last year. It took them a half both times. It maybe took them the first half of the game both times, but they had pretty good counter punches to a lot of what the Chiefs were doing. I do think the Chiefs' play calling and some of their own mental errors on the field made it easier both times. So it's not like the Bengals just completely stonewalled them, not to take credit away from them, but you kind of got to hope the Chiefs slip up again. I think we saw it. When the Chiefs were clicking offensively last year, they had no problem picking apart this Bengals defense at all. And I don't think most good offenses didn't have too hard of a time picking apart the majority of this Bengals defense. It's just when the Bengals defense decided to make some changes, that helped. And when offenses were making mistakes, this defense was very opportunistic. If that continues into this year, if the Chiefs are willing to kind of, step on their own feet again, it could very well go the exact same way where the Bengals are going to put up a ton of points against them and do just enough defensively to hang on.
I mean, yeah, that's you nail it. Do what they did last year. If the Chiefs sleepwalk through a half, it's over. Like you can't sleepwalk against this team. They are explosive enough. They have enough talent on the squad. You're going to see this group of guys be able to put up points in a hurry if you're not playing a complete game. And the Chiefs didn't play a complete game in either one of those instances. Let down right before the half, let down right before the end of the game in that first one, then let down an entire second half in the second one. Like, we saw what can happen. You can't get complacent against this team. They can put up points in a hurry, and that goes not just for the players, but for the staff as well. Got to keep the pedal down. You got to keep doing what's working. If the run game is working, Andy, keep feeding the run game. Hey, Spags, the dime defense and that two robber, that shift that you're doing over and over again, guess what? It's not working. Like there's a lot of stuff you got to be more willing to adjust and more willing to keep doing what is working to try and make sure that everybody can finish this, because this team will hang around. The one thing that they have over probably every other team in the AFC, they are freaking resilient and they are hard to kill. And so I think that alone makes them a ridiculously tough matchup at any point in the year, because they're just going to be hard to make go away all season long. I'll start off with this one. The Chiefs non-Mahomes MVP, I'm calling my shot here, is Chris Jones. You want to talk about a man who's amped up to play the Bengals again? All right, they went through and they changed a lot of stuff on the offensive line. They made a lot of adjustments to try and stop what Chris Jones would potentially be trying to do in this game from happening. Chris Jones has talked about this offseason how much that missed sack on Joe Burrow has haunted him. He had the chance to end the game right then and there, and he was unable to do so. That is gnawing at him. If there's a team that he has circled on the calendar this year, it is this game and this team, because he wants to get out there. He wants to show it again. And as we saw teams last year, you start hitting Joe Burrow, the eyes drop. All of a sudden, the YOLO balls stop going to Jamar Chase as far down the field. You stop getting as many explosive plays. He has a chance to step in there and wreck the game here, and he can be that kind of difference maker in a game like this.
As tempting as it is to say, like, one of the corners for stepping up, or the offensive tackle for not allowing the untimely pressure from Hendrickson, I'm gonna have to go with Travis Kelce. I know it's a little bit of a shock here, but actually the Bengals did a pretty good job defending Travis Kelce last year. They kept him almost 5 yards below his season average for yards per target. Like, when Kelce got the ball, he got a lot of passes in that playoff game, but it was a lot of passes to get 95 yards. Yeah, he scored 2 touchdowns on them, but he essentially became a check down receiver against this defense because the Bengals did a good job taking away everything over the top. Kelce was getting a lot of attention underneath. I do think if the Chiefs are going to find 4 quarters of success against this team, whenever the Bengals start to make their adjustments, they are going to have to find a way to throw the ball to him, not 5 yards down the field over and over again. He's going to, put him in position to take advantage of a linebacker group that looks really good on paper, but when they get out there and start playing, I think they are average in coverage at best. Their safety room is good. Von Bell, Jesse Bates are very good, but I don't think either guy particularly matches up with Kelsey. Like, I think he's a bad matchup for them. The Chiefs just got to make sure they're finding a way to get him open and not just checking the ball down to him, because really their offense does go through Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey. You want to beat a team that beat you twice the last year, you better find a way to get your second best player going.
Absolutely. And that was, this is like the last major game. We're going to talk about some of this, but this is the last one that like you feel like, okay, that's a team that can and should probably hang with this Chiefs team. Like, they are good enough to do so. So this is kind of the last one. And that right there is week 13. So moving on to week 14, got a divisional opponent. Divisional games are still tough. Not trying to say that those aren't and that they don't have other tough games here, but this brings on the very first week. This is going to be at the Denver Broncos. We have not talked about the Broncos yet. Week 14 is the first time that we get to see the fighting Russell Wilsons here. I mean, I'll dive into quality of the roster here. This is I liked this roster a lot. Like, we talked last year a lot about how this roster is a quarterback away from being ridiculously good. Russell Wilson is a quarterback. He's certainly an upgrade over what they've had in the previous couple of years, but I don't know at this point. It remains to be seen how he's going to tilt the field, like how that's going to change things. I can see a situation where Russell Wilson steps in and this team is very good and very potent on offense, but I do kind of look at the rest of it. There are questions on the offensive line. They just lost Tim Patrick, a guy that I was a massive fan of. Just lost Tim Patrick there. Jerry Jeudy so far in camp, lots of clips of him dropping balls. Like, I don't know if we're going to see more of that this season. I hope not. He's a guy that I'm a big fan of. Just, he could do it against the Chiefs, but just not anywhere else. And then, the defense has some pieces, but like, what are they going to look like without the mastermind behind some of their really good defenses lately? The more I look at this roster, the more questions I have about various positions of it. And this late in the season, there's going to be so much tape on them. Like, they're not going to be able to save stuff to try and beat the Chiefs. They're not going to be able to have all that stuff. So Andy's going to get a full game prep on a divisional opponent this late in the season. Andy and Spags both. I just don't know that now that I'm looking at it, the quality of the roster itself, it's certainly not in the Bengals tier. It's certainly not in any of those other AFC teams that I've mentioned or any of the other NFC teams that we've talked about earlier. I just start to look at this a little bit more, and I don't love the roster as much as maybe I used to, Maddie.
It's tricky, right? Because I look through the roster and I can pinpoint position groups that I think are really, really good towards, some upper parts. Like, before the Tim Patrick injury, the wide receiver room was obviously very good. Like, that's a really good 1, 2, 3 with Sutton, Patrick, and then Jeudy rounding that out as the third. And then, like, you look on the defensive side, their secondary. It's a quality. Patrick Surtain's a stud. Ronald Darby has been relatively good for them. Like, it's a good secondary as well when you have Justin Simmons back. Like, they have certain position groups that I do think push that Bengals tier or even maybe a little bit higher. But then you start to poke through and you find some other kind of parts of the roster. Like, you start looking at their offensive line. It's essentially the same offensive line that's had some holes in it the past couple of years. Yes, they bringing in some guys there with Billy Turner, and they're getting Quinn Miners going to play full time there. These guys are better than what they've had, but I don't think that anybody's jumping out of their boots to say, oh, wow, look how good this offensive line is going to be. It seems like it's a whole lot of good, but not a lot of great or not a lot of better. And then, like, the few holes they have, like their linebacker room, nothing there really, sparks you of any fear, whether it's a Josie Jewell, whether whoever they decide, Baron Browning, if they run him out, it's guys that belong in the NFL, but I don't know if you're afraid to go up and play with them. And then, like, the biggest thing of all, this is a game late in the year. Russell Wilson's already turned into a pumpkin by now. So now you go from having this fringe top 5 quarterback early in the season to having a fringe top 15 quarterback down the stretch. And then we're going to, as we transition now, new offense. Like, what is Nathaniel Hackett's offense going to look like? The last time we saw just a true, this is Nathaniel Hackett's offense, it was the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Blake Bortles, the Leonard Fournette, and it was based around the run game. And I think that's something they're going to try to do in Denver. Like, I really do think it's going to be, as much as Russell Wilson, I think, wanted to get away from the run game and basing out of there, the only time that we know Hackett's been in full control, it's been a lot of run game stuff. And even if you look at what Green Bay did, I know a lot of it was LaFleur's offense, but Hackett was there. It was still based a lot out of the run game and a lot out of play action. And I think it'll work in Denver. I think they have the right pieces with their running back room, but I don't know if year one is the time you're going to come in. Hackett's going to bring in this quote unquote new offense that's going to get everybody excited. And is that excitement going to carry in after a few bad weeks? What does that do to this locker room? Or you have this locker room that's had a stagnant offense for a few years now. And then you're looking back and like, okay, well, that Blake Bortles Jaguars team kind of fell flat after after the one good year with Hackett. The Green Bay offense, very good with Aaron Rodgers, but it also became Aaron Rodgers, go save us. Is their plan going to be a Russell Wilson, go save us? Because that's the case. I think the guy's a good half decade away or, beyond being able to go save them. So I like that addition of Nathaniel Hackett as a head coach. I just don't know if on year one, he's going to hit the ground running. I don't know if he is ready for that step right now. And I don't know if we have enough information about what his style of offense is going to look like. I don't know if he got the best coordinator group or assistant coaching group to go along with it to kind of help push it forward.
It does help that they have good backs. I think that's the part on offense that I look at and I'm like, man, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, that's a hell of a tandem. Like, you at least got that. If they got to lean on the run game a little more, you at least got that. I'm looking at the defensive side. You got Ivero. He came from Los Angeles, the Rams, so he spent some time in a Fangio defense. Like, he is born from that. So it's not like they've got this Fangio personnel and now all of a sudden you're switching to a completely different defense and all that. No, it makes sense. They did a good job. I actually think that that's a smart hire for them because they're not having to reinvent the wheel there. But it's the first time as a defensive coordinator. We do these and we talk about this all the time. It is overwhelming to be hit with some of that game day prep and to have to do it. And especially when you get late in the year and you've been grinding through everything and there's more tape to cover, there's more things to do, and you haven't seen Andy Reid regularly as a defensive coach, it is hard as hell to prepare for that offense. So they're going to see him twice in a very short span of time at the end of the season. And this first one is going to be tough. It's legitimately going to be tough. I think that they could click. I think this defense could be one that does play pretty well off the bat because, again, you're not having to reinvent the wheel there, but he's got a lot on his plate all season long. And now when the grind is really hitting and things are really tough, you got to walk in, here in December, and try and play against Andy Reid in December. Like, woof. That's just a tough draw for them. It just kind of remains to be seen how he's going to handle some of that stuff. Let's talk about it.
Now, I got to see, here's the thing. This is what happens when you get Craig and us together. We got to go down this little conceptual thing here. How long so Vic Fangio was doing the Vic Fangio too high defense, obviously, for a while now, but he was kind of one of one or one of very few playing this style of defense all the time. So the NFL lets that go. It's now become mainstream. Like, it's now become the thing that everybody does. How much longer do you think that is going to be flummoxing NFL offenses? Because I'm thinking back to the last time we had this big transition. It was the Seattle Seahawks style of cover 3. And I'd say the Seahawks were really good with it for about 5 years? Roughly.
Oh, buddy,
5
you're right up my alley. Yes, it was about 6-7 years that they were really, and then everybody in the NFL was also copying cover 3 for a number of years after that. But yes.
Right. Yeah. So like the Seahawks were probably really good with it for like a total of 6-7 years, but like it probably caught fire after year 3, after year 4, which is about where I think we have gotten with this kind of too high structure. But Seattle was one of the last teams to really still hold on strong to that cover 3 and still make it work. Not a lot of other teams had the same level of success as they did with this. Like, are we nearing that point where this too high structure or thing is so, or not convoluted, but like so widespread across the NFL? The NFL offenses are about to start tearing it up like they do cover 3 when teams base out of it.
Yes.
And if we're there, is Ejiro Evero the guy you want to be manning that defense? Like, I don't know very much about what he's done because it hasn't been not a ton of experience. It's just, is that the name you want at the top of the list when 32 teams are sitting here preparing for 28 other teams to play this same style of defense? Is he the guy you want to be adding the wrinkles and coaching it up? Like, I don't know, but like, I feel like we're kind of there.
Well, and I mean, yeah, as I've been doing this too high structure stuff, like I get to the Fangio stuff and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I mean, this is all stuff that teams know how to beat, teams know how to do it. That they do a good job of disguising everything to the last minute, which is the real key there. And I mean, the thing that I put when I covered the Fangio thing for KCSN Daily, Substack, kcsn.substack.com, the thing that I covered there was, I just said, run the damn ball. Like that's you want to knock a team out of it, run the damn ball, because it's predicated on not caring about the run. It's hard to not care about the run as a defensive coordinator, especially a young one, when a team is running it down your throat. Yes, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. Yes, he should touch the ball as often as possible. I fully agree. Passing is better, but you know what the best way to get a team that wants to play too high, wants to have that late rotation, wants to do all that, they tip their hand a lot sooner. You force them to do things a lot sooner, which makes it easier on Patrick Mahomes to throw the ball if they don't want to be as deep in their too high structure or as late into the snap, because you've got lighter boxes, you got an offensive line you can lean on, you're going to run the ball. I think we are seeing teams build up offensive lines that are built to run a little more power, built to run some of this stuff, and backs that are built to catch the ball and still be able to run some of this between the tackle stuff. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy like that. Vic Fangio and Brendan Staley, to a lesser degree, have run this defense ridiculously well. They have. And now it's all over the league. So everybody's running it. The Chiefs have been preparing for that Fangio defense for a long time. Andy has his beaters in there and has had them for a long time. I agree with what they did by hiring Evero into this position. I think it's a good hire because of the consistency and all of that. But Evero, unless he comes out and lights the world on fire, is probably not going to have a better game plan, probably not going to have a better approach than any of these other guys that Andy has still been able to figure out and still be able to put on tape. If other teams want to keep spinning off of this defensive style and doing more of this, I am fine with it, because I truly believe that the Chiefs offense and Andy Reid will be able to figure it out. Once they start putting more of that stuff on tape, good luck, because then every other team is going to copy it. And then, like Maddie said, it's just like the Seattle cover 3. You're going to have Dallas trying to play with Chris Richards down there and playing that cover 3 and all of that. And then everybody's talking about how terrible the defense is because teams figured it out. That's what happens. I mean, Gus Bradley's still trotting out that same cover 3 defense right now. And man, he's getting walloped. And Gus Bradley's not a bad defensive coordinator with the way that he teaches that cover 3. It's just, everybody knows how to beat it. So yes, I agree, Maddie. I think that everybody.
How many more years does it have? How many more years is NFL Game Day or whatever they call that show anymore going to lead with this too high structure is flummoxing the league right now? Like, how many more years do we have before it's blown up to nothing? Okay,
I think 2 more. I think 2 more, because I think I think we're about to see a little bit of resurgence in the next couple of years, and then there'll be a new hotness that comes along, and we'll be talking about how it's the best thing ever and all of that.
And then people are going to realize it's just a 3-4 defense.
Exactly. It's just it's a 3-4 defense. Only the athletes got better, so you can actually trust your outside linebackers to drop and cover the number 3. That's what it'll be.
Jeez,
just a novel concept there. All right. Now that we did that for a long time, new addition. I'm gonna start with this. It's Russ. It's Russell Wilson.
Let's ride.
Let's ride. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I think, everybody knows who Russ is. But at this point, Russell Wilson hasn't had a game where he threw for more than 300 yards in like the latter half of the season since, I mean, we're talking we're talking 2019. Like, and it was week 9 of 2019. I guess he did have one in week 9 of 2020 as well. But most of the games after that, like there are some real duds in here. 121 yards, 206 yards, throwing lots of interceptions, things like that. Like Maddie talked about, turn into a pumpkin. You just don't look as good. It's not as precise. It's not as crisp. And you can talk about how this Broncos offense he's stepping into is going to be good. And maybe it's better than the Seahawks offense, but he wasn't throwing to scrubs. He was throwing to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Like, it's not like he was throwing to guys that can't catch the ball, that can't get open. Now he's coming into this offense. Now he's got to go up against all these new teams that he's playing each and every week. I look at Russ and I don't know. I don't see him finishing the season well again. And I think there might be some buyer's remorse once they get towards the very, very end of the season. Might be looking at it going, man, did we miss the playoffs again with this quarterback? Was this the right move to give up all of those assets for? So it's Russ for me. They're going to live and die by him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the obvious one. I'm going to go Randy Gregory. I think that the Broncos pass rush last year was really, really bad, especially when Bradley Chubb was hurt. But they've had some issues over the years that Bradley Chubb and Von Miller were rarely healthy together or rarely healthy enough to be as impactful as they wanted to be together. And that really did stall out Fangio's style of defense. They were still a really good defense, but it matters when you don't have those two edge guys coming off the sides, or if you don't have a dominant interior pass rusher to pair with one of them. So just getting similar style of defense again here where it's coming from, they need to get a more consistent pass rush, whether that is Bradley Chubb returning to health. And I don't know if he's ever going to be a dominant edge rusher in the NFL. So you could even throw him into like my next category of player to watch. Like, it's a big year for him. But like this defensive end combo, how good are they going to be? Are they going to be good? Are they going to be great? Are they going to be competing with the Raiders and the Chargers in terms of dominating the division with their speed rush off the edge? Or are they just going to be good? Are they going to be a nuisance that you have to pay attention to going in, but you're not worried about them wrecking the game plan? I think they need them to wreck the game plan. I don't know if Randy Gregory and Bradley Chubb are those guys. I just don't know if they're that good. I think they're both probably pretty good complementary rushers to somebody that's dominant. But when they're both just complementary with each other, it can work. A really good defensive coordinator can absolutely make that work. But if this ends up too much, just, hey, you two, go beat the guy across from you, it might not work that well with all these one-on-ones, and their pass rush might seem a little lackluster by the end of the year, despite the talent that they have across the board. So defensive ends for a new player and my player to watch, who do you have? Who are you looking forward to watch? And you can't say Patrick Surtain.
I'm not going to say Patrick Surtain,
okay,
even though Patrick Surtain is awesome, and I can't wait to watch him. Man, this division and guys that they drafted last year that I really enjoy watching. My guy is Kaywon Williams, a guy that I really liked. I would have been fine with the Chiefs signing him last offseason, but this team, when they're playing in this Fangio defense, needs a nickel corner that can fit the run. Kaywon Williams can. He's a very willing guy in that regard. But we are seeing more teams go to, as our buddy Nate Tice calls it, the power slot. Big guy operating out of the slot. We were there in camp. Guess what we saw out of the slot? Big guy operating out of the slot, whether it be Juju, MVS, even Sky Moore is a bigger guy, like solid guy out of the slot. Kaywon Williams is going to have his hands full all season long with what they're going to ask him to do. He's got to play really well. He's got to play well above his height like he has this entire career. I just think that maybe the types of receivers that they're putting in the slot now that offenses are trying to go to is going to make his job a lot harder this season. So I got my eye on him here. All right, real quick. How's this team beat the Chiefs, Maddie?
Ooh, this is one that I have a little bit harder time. I think there's a lot of Chiefs fans that are scared of this team. I think there's a lot of Chiefs fans that look at the Broncos, they see some names that are recognizable, rightfully so, and they get a little scared and they think it's going to be close. I think a lot of things have to go right for this Broncos team to beat the Chiefs. I think that Evero have to come out almost with something not brand new, but new enough that the Chiefs are completely unready for it. How you're doing that at what are we looking at? Like week 13 here, week 14 here? Like, How are you doing that late in the season? I don't know, but I almost feel like you have to catch the Chiefs off guard to win with the differences in the roster. You have to get Russell Wilson playing at his absolute A game. Jerry Jeudy has to be better than he has been in the NFL. Like, he's been a fine wide receiver, but he's got to take that step and be really good to allow that offense to work. So like, I don't see a very good path for this team being the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs match up really well against them. I think a rookie coaching staff plus the Russell Wilson kind of floundering over the past few years and where the holes on this Broncos team are, it would be very difficult if the coaching staff doesn't come up just essentially with something new out of the gate.
It's got to be the weapons. Weapons got to take over. Those backs got to just take over, play well above what they even can. All those weapons got to take over because they're going to have to score. I think they're going to have to score to keep up. I think they're going to have to score to beat what Andy will have dialed up there. So fully down to individual efforts from those guys. I don't think a game plan is going to do it. I just don't. I don't. All right. My non-Mahomes MVP here is going to be Frank Clark. Frank Clark looked great in camp so far this year. He looks lighter. He looks more nimble. He looks better moving. Like, I think we're going to see a good version of him. And he's going up against Garrett Bowles and Billy Turner, who aren't bad tackles by any means. But Frank Clark, the way that he's looked with the explosion that he has on the outside, I feel like this is one of those games that Frank Clark can show up and make a bunch of plays, especially as Russell Wilson likes to drop deeper, hold on to the ball, trying to hit some of those guys deep into their route there. Just going to give Frank Clark a little bit of extra time on the outside to go out there, take over a game, get some pressures, get a couple of sacks, and really turn the tide on this one.
I alluded to it. I think the Broncos defensive ends are going to be kind of the key to how their season goes. So when they go up against the Chiefs, obviously Travis Kelce's performance against the Broncos is going to be the key. Since Fangio took over with this style of defense, it's kind of been every other game Travis Kelce's been dominant or shut down. It's really almost depended kind of on the game flow. But that style of defense that we're talking about here, that we assume the Broncos are going to run again, can do a good job of shutting down Kelce working over the middle of the field. When you have one safety spinning down late from whichever side they decide, it can easily take away some of those middle of the field routes. It seems like the Chiefs have had a hard time pegging that down with Fangio. Will that be the same case with the new defensive staff there in Denver? I think Denver has a couple safeties that are willing to make it difficult for Kelce, but that linebacker group is so bad. I would not be surprised to see Kelce tear them apart when given the opportunity, go over 100 yards like he used to do to Denver before Fangio got there every single game they played.
You don't think that Travis remembers the way that he was hit last year in these Broncos
that was the first game. That was the first game though, right? And then the
Uh-huh.
second game came back, and that was when he had his good game. That was when he went, I think, for 100-ish
Oh,
yards.
he still remembers. He still remembers.
Oh, no,
All
no,
right.
he didn't do much in the next game either, actually. But that was the end of the year. They were only like half going at it. That's right. But it was,
Gotcha.
every other year before Fangio, it's just been every other game. He had a huge game and then a quiet game. I don't trust this defense to shut him down without Fangio right now.
That's true. I'm with him there. And stick with us. We're going to take a small break here. We will be back to break down the final two unique Chiefs opponents of the season. We'll be right back after this. And we are back. If you like what we're doing here, click the like button, click the share button, click subscribe, drop us a 5-star review. Some of you guys have been dropping 5-star reviews. We thank you.
Click
we appreciate
everything.
those.
Just click.
Those are
click,
great.
click, click,
Man. Click. You got your mouse. You got your hand on your mouse. Just direct it where you need to right now. Just work your way through all those things. We'll be here for you. All right, Maddie. We are 42 minutes into this podcast. We have been going for a little while here, and I purposefully suggested that we do these last two teams, even though it meant that it was going to be, 4 teams, and typically we do 2, and we do about an hour. These two teams, it is hard to do a full episode on with the way that everything is. I'll be honest, I'll fall on that sword. This is the Seattle Seahawks and the Houston Texans are the next two, or, it's the Texans and the Seahawks, but like
saving the best for last.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm going to start and just kind of make a blanket statement about both these teams. The quality of the roster for both of these teams is not very good. We'll start here with the Texans. They don't have a ton of weapons. I mean, Brandon Cooks might be the best wide receiver in the AFC South, but man, that's not saying much. He's still a good receiver.
He's really good.
It's just not saying much. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball and you just wonder where all this is coming from. I mean, currently, like they're looking at starting Eric Murray and Steven Nelson in this secondary right now. Like there's a lot of questions. Where's the pressure going to come from? Where's who the linebackers? Are they going to be able to play well? Like, are they going to be able to keep Davis Mills upright all season long? I mean, where are the plays coming from? I mean, it's not good, Maddie. It's not good. It's not a good quality of roster.
Reading this defensive depth chart in particular reads like when we do the KCSN draft guide, it reads like if you sort by the lowest scores that we've given any player since we started. Like if I just lumped everyone together and sorted by the lowest scores, the amount of day 3 and undrafted free agent names that I recognize just from the last 3 years of the NFL draft that are starting or listed as like key backups on this defensive depth chart is insane. Like it is. Yeah, they have some talent. We don't even have to split this up into different segments. Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley, 2 rookies that are stepping out into the secondary. Very fun to watch. Those guys could be a ton of fun. That's where I'm going to keep my eyes when I do watch this team. I think those 2 guys could be very special. The problem is they're going to have to cover guys for 18 seconds. So Jonathan Grenard and Malik Collins and Roy Lopez and Mario Addison can get home. Like, where are they getting pressure? Like, okay, no, we'll just blitz. You're going to blitz Garrett Wallow or Christian Kirksey, who can barely move anymore. Like, where are you going to get pressure with this team? You're putting a lot of pressure on the few players on this team, Stingley and Petrie, that have a little bit of talent on the back end. So, like, it's going to be hard for, I think, this team to find a lot of success. And they're clearly in a long-term rebuild. And the defensive side of the ball, oddly enough, looks even worse, which is kind of surprising for a Lovey. Like, you think if you're bringing back a defensive-minded coach, you might give him a little bit more talent to work with on defense. They said no. The offense isn't a lot better, but at least, like we mentioned, Brandon Cooks, you got Davis Mills, who was very good last year for a rookie quarterback, and you got some guys on the offense, like Laramie Tunsil, I know long, like a thick neck, just thick. But they got some time. I don't know. It's a weird roster. They're clearly in a rebuild, and the defense is one of the worst rosters I've ever witnessed.
It's wild. I mean, and here's the funny part. They spent a top 5 pick on Derek Stingley. They spent a high draft pick on Jalen Petrie. They spent a 3rd rounder on Christian Harris. Like, these aren't people that we dislike. Like, they're fine players, but they're it. Like,
those are by far their best 3 defensive players. So,
and they haven't taken a snap yet. And then you turn around, on offense. Yeah, they spent another 1st round pick on Kenyon Green. I like Kenyon Green. He's a good, fine foundational piece, but he's a left guard. And there's only so many things that you're going to be able to do. And when your wide receiver core is Nico Collins, Brando Cooks, and then Philip Dorsett, Chris Conley, Chris Moore. I mean, it really kind of falls off a cliff. And it's not even like they've got a really good running back room. Marlon Mack is fine. Rex Burkhead is fine. But it's like the rest of this. Like, I think their ceiling is fine at the positions that you're looking at guys and you're like, oh, okay, well, those are some of your better positions. Like, it's fine. And so, like, even the new additions, the players to watch, there's just not a whole lot to watch here outside of maybe Davis Mills. Like, if he does it again with this group, like, we can, he's legit. Like, we can go ahead and call him a good quarterback, a guy that they can build around, the guy that they don't need to go out and try and find a replacement for. But it really does feel like, once again here, that they are saying, yep, we are just going to go ahead and rebuild. And we're now going to be in year 3 of the rebuild after this season. And yikes, the roster quality, this is not great. Maddie, do you want to talk about this coaching staff a little bit? I mean,
well, first, we're doing a quick game. I'm going to name 3 players that have been drafted in the last 3 years that are listed as starters from the Texans. I just want you to tell me what school that these guys went to.
Okay.
Pharaoh Brown, a tight end.
Who?
Pharaoh Brown, a tight end.
Oh my goodness. I at least recognize the name. Wasn't he from the Northwest? Is he like
Yeah, that's
a Pac-12
correct.
guy?
That's
Okay.
correct.
I
Oregon.
couldn't tell you
give it
which
half a point.
school.
Half a point for Oregon.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, good.
Roy Lopez, a nose tackle.
Roy Lopez. I remember Roy Lopez. He was Pac-12. Was he Arizona?
He was. That's a good one. That's a good pull. I did not think that when you were like a lot of these names, like similar. I recognize. I just don't know. This is the easiest one. I just wanted to find one more. Jonathan Grenard, defensive end.
Oh, Jonathan Grenard was Florida, right?
That's correct. So, hey,
yes.
Look at you. You got 2.5 points. That's a lot better than I thought you were going to pull off, because those are some names. Those are some names.
Pressure cooker there. I'm so glad that I secondary watched your guys. So that I knew Roy Lopez and Jonathan Grenard was at least a Senior Bowl guy. I remember watching him. So
yeah. Anyway, okay, coaching staff. I like Pep Hamilton. I think it's a good person to bring in for someone like David. I think the Texans would be good I like how they are giving Davis Mills another year to see what becomes, because did they find one of the rare hits, not in round 1 at quarterback, that they can use to be their guy that is good enough? Can he be a Ryan Tannehill level quarterback, or maybe a little bit better than Kirk Cousins, but like that level of quarterback that's good enough that you can just build around him for the next 3 years, see what the ceiling is going to be before having to go out and trade everything to get a guy. So you give him a year to do that. I think Pep Hamilton is a good offensive coordinator to give him that. Doesn't have a lot to work with, but at least like we were saying, I think Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins has some talent. They have talent-ish at running backs with Marlon Mack and Rex Burkhead. They have guys that can do things. He has just enough, and then I think Tunzel, Green, Justin Britt give you a solid enough offensive line. Pep Hamilton should be able to run his offense there and give Davis Mills a chance to prove that he can be the guy.
Yeah, I like some of the. I like Lovey. I think Lovey's a good coach. I think that he does well with defensive coaching. So I don't know about head coach or anything like that, but like I look at a lot of this and I just see a lot of guys where I like that they went maybe a little younger with their coaching staff. I think a lot of these guys are giving themselves a lot of swings at developing guys. Maybe that's a Lovey initiative there, but I really like the amount of swings that they spent there. I'm with Maddie. I think Pep Hamilton is a really good coach. That just not a lot of talent for these guys to coach. So it's kind of rough to watch here. Okay, Maddie, how does this team beat the Chiefs?
No. Next, no. This is just a hard no. Like, the only way they win is if the Chiefs absolutely positively implode and play their worst game. Like, and when I say teams don't have a chance, I'm like obviously excluding that. Like, in terms of if both teams are playing even at their average, or if the Chiefs play average, I don't see how the Texans even come close to competing.
I mean, Brandon Cooks goes for 400 yards. Like, that's kind of the way it is. And Derek Stingley gets cloned and they put him all over the secondary. It's tough. This is just one of those, like, here at the end of the season, it's week 15. The Chiefs are going to be humming. The Texans are probably going to be out of everything. Like, there's not going to be a ton for them to play for. And like, it's just going to be, I think you're going to see a lot of these guys that are going to know it. They're going to be protecting themselves a little bit. And I think this is going to be one, might end up being a little closer than we all want it to be because of all of that. But like, this team is unfortunately not one that can hang with it. Do we even need to do an MVP here, Maddie? I mean,
it's Travis Kelce because Garrett Wallow's on the field. Like,
I'm going to say it's going to be, let's call it Turk Wharton. I'm sticking with the defensive side of the ball there. Turk Wharton. Turk is going to get a lot of reps in the dime in this game. A lot of reps to get after Davis Mills. I think we're going to see the starters pulled a little bit early. Turk's going to get in there and get a lot of reps. He's looked pretty good in camp so far. So give the man a shout out here. All right, now let's move on to the final unique opponent. Week 16 here. Seattle Seahawks. I mean, Maddie, quality of the roster here. It is better than the Texans. I think we can agree. It is. Yeah.
I'm going to speed run them a little bit. We're going late on time, and it's maybe a little unfair to the Seahawks to not give them a little bit more time than this, but at the same time, this is definitely a step back from the kind of roster overall talent that they have had through most of this run with Pete Carroll. Like they still have not figured out the offensive line. Now they went out and addressed it by drafting Charles Cross. Abraham Lucas, I think, should probably hopefully earn that right tackle spot for them. They brought in Gabe Jackson recently. Like they have brought in guys. They've tried to address the offensive line, but I don't know if I'm ready to say it's great as of yet. Their wide receiver with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, clearly good. The problem is who's playing quarterback. Geno Smith, Drew Lock. Yep. Should be Geno. It should be Geno Smith. Let me be very clear. Geno Smith, as bad as he has been, compared to the hype, he should start over Drew Lock. Their issue is defensively. This is not a Seahawks defense. Like it's a collection of guys that haven't really worked out is essentially the best way I can put it. It's a collection of players that have, whether they've drafted or they've signed at free agents, that haven't been as good as everyone thought they were going to be. And that's odd to see from the Seahawks. It's not Seahawks guys. It's not their talent, caliber of guys. So that's where the issue for this team. It's better than the Texans, but it's still a collection of guys that I think have generally underperformed the hype that fans or media have put on them with previous teams or the Seahawks in the past.
I want you to put some respect on Poona Ford's name. I will not stand for Poona Ford disrespect here.
But same thing, as a rookie, everybody got really hyped because he was a lot better than an undrafted free agent should have been. And then he just kind of has been that guy, but not quite as good.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like the hype peaked and then he just never went anywhere. He's fine. He's fine to have on the roster. But I mean, and just everybody, all these guys they have, Justin Coleman, Artie Burns, Jamal Adams, these are guys who had certain levels of hype throughout their career. They didn't reach them. They end up on the Seahawks and now they've just all ended up there together.
And see, the funny part is I can look at this team. They have Trey Brown on this team, a guy that I really liked last year, and Kobe Bryant and Tariq Woolen as two new guys. We're going to talk a little bit about new additions there. There's a chance by this point in the season with the Seahawks maybe being out of the running for a lot of this stuff, which with Geno and Drew Lock as your quarterback, it's going to be tough to hang with a good NFC West there. They may be out of the running. They may be giving some of these young guys some run. Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, Quandre Diggs, and Jamal Adams, that's, if they're playing well, that's at least a secondary that I'm semi-excited about. I can look at it and say, yeah, I can see where those guys might end up being okay, or they might end up being a little bit better. Jordan Brooks has been better than I think that I thought he was going to be, but he's still not a stud by any means. And the guys playing next to him are not great. They don't have a pass rush. They don't have, LJ Collier still in this rotation. We're still looking at guys like that and saying, well, they're going to play some serious snaps. So the path to success here, to just kind of roll right into how does this team beat the Chiefs? The path to success is that you have to put points on the board, because this defense, Pete Carroll's going to have to pull a rabbit out of the hat to make this defense, really good. And I don't see it. And so they're going to have to score a ton of points with Geno Smith or Drew Lock at quarterback. I mean, they certainly got DK and Tyler are great. They really are great. But boy, that's a lot to put on a guy that hasn't shown it to date. So this is another one for me. I look at this and I'm like, I don't see how this team can hang with not just the Chiefs, but pretty much any of the above average teams that are in the league.
One of the tricks that I think they run into is, even you were mentioning, they have some young guys, and if they start to get them in the Tariq Woolens, the Kobe Bryant's in there, and you pair them with Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, you just fed me a lineup that I think would fit best for the old school Seattle Seahawks cover three and nothing else. The problem is that's not what they want to play anymore, though. They started shifting away from it a little bit last year. And I think Pete Carroll's come out and talked about it. Now, I don't know a ton about Clint Hurt, but I don't think that he is basing his entire defensive structure on cover three. So now I'm picturing, unless they're going to return to that, which they very well might, but if you're going to put, whether it's Woolen or Artie Burns or Sidney Jones or Kobe Bryant, if you're going to have these guys out there playing full on man coverage or doing more stuff, or God forbid, Jamal Adams trying to cover anybody, all of a sudden this stuff looks really, really ugly if you don't limit the scheme they can be in. We already touched on how the pass rush maybe isn't going to be great. I will defend this. LJ Collier has at least been designated to the backup strong side defensive end for them,
Right.
which is essentially like never playing. Like he is not a pass rushing role for them. They have a linebacker that plays out over this strong defensive
True.
end. So like he's barely rushing a pass. So he's just there to be a big
but
body.
the linebacker is Darrell Taylor. Like it's
That's a second round draft pick, Darrell Taylor, to you. Thank you.
LJ Collier was a first round pick. Like and then Alton Robinson is behind. Like again, you look at all these
Boy
guys,
Mafe,
like,
Uchenna, and Wosu,
that's true. Boy, Mafe might end up being okay.
They hide
here.
their linebacker room instead of their defensive end room. It's weird on their depth chart. I get it. I'm with you. I don't think this team has a great path to beating the Chiefs. I do think if things break right for them, they could maybe be semi-competitive for an average Chiefs game. If Geno Smith or Drew Lock have the game of their lives and they're really dealing, if this offensive line is gelling by this time, they have the wide receiver weapons. They have the talented enough running back room with Kenneth Walker joining, Rashad Penny there, who had a fantastic down the stretch season performance. They could put up some points on a Chiefs defense that I think will be gelling a little bit by then. But if the Chiefs come out and play a C-level game, I think there's enough talent around the quarterback. The problem is you're still relying on Drew Lock and Geno Smith to really get those points going. At the end of the day, though, I don't see where this defense does stop the Chiefs. I'm with you there. I think it's going to be hard for this defense to really slow down the Chiefs or most teams. I think it's, again, a collection of guys that will not live up to the hype that the Seahawks put on them or that other teams had put on them when they acquired them. I think that it's going to be a below average defense all year. And when you have Drew Lock and Geno Smith at quarterback,
you can't do that. You can't afford that. Non-Mahomes MVP for me, Joshua Williams lining up against DK Metcalf, length on length, has a good game and builds some hype going into the playoffs for the Chiefs, here in late in the season. So I'd go with Josh Williams.
It's a tough one. Like you could pick a lot of different players. I was intrigued to go with an offensive tackle because they have to block Jamal Adams rushing off the edge on third down. So we know he's not going to cover. He's going to step down and play defensive end. I was going to pick Willie Gay to shut down Noah Fant like every other linebacker in the NFL has done since Noah Fant has joined the NFL. But I'm going to have to go with Travis Kelce as we get on out of here. And we have rounded off the season-long preview for the Chiefs. This is every unique opponent the Chiefs will play this year has now been previewed. The good news is we will get far more in depth with every single one of these teams the week the Chiefs play them. And that starts in about a month now. So that's fun.
Can you imagine not just us, but the Matts, Matt Castle, Matt Hamilton just being like, this team stinks. We'll catch you next week at the end of it.
Listen,
we get to the end of the season.
I'm not going to put any specific words in there, but I have been on video calls with certain people of the Matt's caliber that have said, boy, this team sure isn't good before or after a game. So, it exists. They're just like us.
It does. Just to round this out, week 17, Chiefs host the Broncos, and then they travel to Las Vegas to finish out the season. 2 free wins. The end of the season is definitely a lot easier on the Chiefs than the beginning is. It's a nice way to go into the playoffs there. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the KC Laboratory. I thank Maddie for joining me. I thank you all for listening all the way through all of this stuff. Stay tuned. We got all kinds of stuff from KCSN every single day. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're listening. Stay as up to date as possible, and we'll catch you later.